sentence you to die. Dracarys.
Game of Thrones is a show that's more about the bloodbaths, steamy rendezvous, or those "I did not see that coming" moments than the game itself. But unlike the real world, Westeros was influenced as much by women as by men. While some of these brought their A game in cunning and deception, the others were more righteous than the likes of Captain America and Superman. From the battlefield skills of Brienne of Tarth to the trickery of Cersei Lannister, from the moral compass of Daenerys Targaryen to the sheer willpower of Arya Stark, these ladies defined what it meant to be powerful in the Seven Kingdoms and beyond. But there have been so many of them throughout the 7 seasons. So in this video, we'll explore the 15 most powerful characters from Game of Thrones. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Dracarys.
Daenerys Targaryen. Oh, Daenerys Targaryen. Where do we even start with her? She started as this young blonde gal who was humiliated, dominated, and used by her stupid and evil brother, Viserys, and then got traded into a marriage with Khal Drogo. When she finally found love in Khal Drogo, she lost her unborn child, and also the cow. To add to the misery, she had to face betrayal from those she truly trusted. However, none of this made Daenerys crave power and authority. At least not initially. She had this big heart and aimed to smash the old cruel ways and genuinely wanted her people to live free and happy. That's why pretty much everyone loved and respected her. But let's not sugarcoat it. She did have that Targaryen fire, or madness, depending on your perspective, in her, courtesy of her father, the Mad King. Every now and then, she did flash a bit of that temper, like when she offered the Tarlys to Drogon for not kneeling. Growing up, Daenerys always found herself in the shadow of her brother's obnoxious temper tantrums. As a child, she was naive and on the run, but her time with the Dothraki transformed her and taught her confidence and leadership, and it was then that her smarts really started to show. Although one of the most powerful women in all of Westeros, and even Essos, Daenerys was not really a great military commander. Yes, she had some big wins under her belt, like her successes in Slaver's Bay and Meereen, but if I have to be honest, she had the numbers and those dragons giving her a hefty edge. So you'll definitely win if you bring flamethrowers in a battle of knives. Having said that, a ruler doesn't have to fight their own battles to become great. Even in Westeros, her strategies were rather on point, but it was the mistakes of her advisors and allies that led to her facing setbacks. And then she lost Rhaegal, after which you could see the fire in her eyes ready to torch the Iron Fleet then and there. And then came her descent into madness, which is a universally hated character development. However, before things went south, Daenerys was this mix of fierce, sometimes a bit too impulsive and dreamy, but always had her heart in the right place. Even though she outplayed her enemies, not getting the love from Westeros hit her hard. That pushed her into the dark side, turning into the very thing she vowed to destroy. Sansa Stark. Queen Sansa Stark had one roller coaster of a life in the Game of Thrones. Starting off as a starry-eyed daughter of Ned and Catelyn Stark, Sansa's dreams of princes and fairy tales quickly turned into nightmares. Originally set to marry Prince Joffrey, she found herself trapped in King's Landing as a pawn in the Lannisters' games after her dad was falsely accused of treachery and executed. Under the wings of Cersei Lannister, Marjorie Tyrell, and Littlefinger, Sansa got a crash course in the brutal realities of politics and power plays. Despite the harsh lessons, these experiences were nothing short of brutal, but shaped her into a political savant in her own right. Her journey didn't get any easier when she got back to Winterfell, only to fall into the clutches of the vile and sadistic Ramsay Bolton. But with a little help from Theon Greyjoy and Brienne of Tarth, she managed to find her Jon Snow. Together, they rallied the North and the Vale, kicked Ramsay in the butt, and reclaimed Winterfell, with Sansa taking the reins as the Lady of Winterfell. But Sansa didn't like Jon bending the knee to Daenerys, nor was she about to let the North be anything but independent. After Daenerys' death, Sansa did not waste time and declared the North a separate kingdom and herself its queen. Gone was the naive girl from season 1. In her place stood a battle-hardened queen who didn't flinch at Ramsay's death or shy away from making tough calls, like the fate of her brother Rickon. She also stepped up as a leader and earned the respect of lords across the North and the Vale. And before long, her bond with Jon grew from distant half-siblings to a strong brother-sister relationship, which was grounded in mutual respect and trust and shaped due to similar hardship. Despite a bumpy start, she and Arya found strength in their differences and became an unstoppable team by season 7's end. And although Bran's transformation into the three-eyed raven was a lot to process, Sansa leaned on his abilities when it mattered most, which led to Littlefinger's much appreciated and long-awaited death. Arya Stark. Arya Stark, the Stark clan's fierce little spitfire, had one of the most fulfilling and satisfying arcs in the show. Maisie Williams absolutely killed it as Arya and evolved her from a rebellious tomboy into a full-blown ninja assassin. She's the one who iced the Night King, basically saving everyone's bacon and bringing the long night to a close. Arya's transformation was off the charts, yet it never felt forced. Fans might have heard Williams wished for a bit more from Arya's ending, but let's be real. Arya sailing into the unknown was peak Arya, lone wolf till the end. Arya's story is nothing short of epic. After dodging the Lannister hit list, she went undercover to the Braavosi assassin school, which you may better know as the House of Black and White. There, she turned into a faceless man and ticked names off her own little hit list like a boss. The way she wiped out the phrase as payback for the Red Wedding, I can't get enough of that badassery. Once the girls return to Winterfell after their long and turbulent lives, Arya and Sansa are initially at each other's throats, and thanks to Littlefinger's tricks, the sisters do not fully trust each other. But once they clocked his game, they patched things up and served him a mouthful of his own medicine. Arya finished the Night King, basically winning the Great War single-handedly, quite literally so. Post that, Arya tagged along with the Hound, with the intention of crossing Cersei off her list. But as King's Landing crumbled under Daenerys' dragonfire, the Hound talked some sense into her. Later, she was present at the Great Council meeting, where Brienne gets the crown. After all the dust settles, Arya leaves to find what lies east of Essos. So yeah, this girl started with a simple lesson of sticking them with a pointy end and became an explorer and a world-class assassin. She's definitely someone you should not mess with.
Seize him. Cut his throat.
Cersei Lannister. Queen Cersei Lannister, the lioness of House Lannister, ruled the Seven Kingdoms with an iron fist and a glass of wine always at hand. Married to King Robert Baratheon, but truly in love, if you can call it that, with her twin brother Jaime, Cersei's life was a hot mess of power plays and scandals. And when fate cruelly took her children from her, Cersei sat on that ugly iron chair and became the Seven Kingdoms' first queen regnant to rock the Iron Throne. But as Tyrion would say, Cersei was a ticking time bomb, the super nuclear kind. She had a knack for making enemies and a blind spot for her own deadly flaws. Needless to say, hypocrisy could very well have been her middle name. I mean, she blamed Tyrion for ruining the Lannister reputation while she herself played the most important role in their downfall, which started with not putting a leash on the despicable Joffrey. If you think about it, she set in motion the events that led to the War of the Five Kings, from Ned Stark's arrest to Tyrion's trial, and once again gave Joffrey free reign to terrorize the realm. In fact, she orchestrated her husband's death after learning that Joffrey was willing to crush everyone, especially the Starks. Cersei's climb to power only amped up her arrogance. She started treating Jaime like he was the dunce of the family, even as he tried to stay true to his promises. Cersei plotted to let her enemies wipe each other out, thinking she could outsmart everyone like Tywin back in the day. But unlike Daddy Lannister, Cersei's plan was more desperation than genius. At her core, Cersei was all about protecting her loved ones, especially her kids and Jaime. Tragically, Cersei's game ended not with a bang, but with a heartbreaking whimper, buried under the Red Keep with Jaime by her side. Melisandre. After Arya Stark took down the Night King, the Red Priestess, Melisandre, decided it was time to rest for good. She ditched her magic bling and aged faster than milk in the sun, and chose to peace out after playing her part in the Battle of Winterfell. The woman who once strutted around with confidence and hyped up the Lord of Light had had enough by the end, and probably felt like she had had enough of this world, and slipped into something more comfortable, like, say, death. Melisandre first appeared in Season 2, and caught the attention of everyone as this mesmerizing and terrifying figure. Dressed to kill and wielding power that turned heads and kings, she was the embodiment of that dangerous allure that fantasy loves to assign to its witches. We know well how powerful her magic was, capable of birthing shadow assassins after some questionable hookups. But let's not forget that Melisandre's moral GPS was always a bit off. She convinced Stannis that he was the chosen one, and then upped the ante by torching his daughter. It was a classic case of just because you can doesn't mean you should. And yet, despite her questionable guidance, it was clear that the men she manipulated were not just innocent bystanders, but active participants in their downfall. After leading Stannis and his forces to a disastrous end, Melisandre had a bit of a rethink. She toned down the meddling and dropped some wisdom on Varys, and also hinted that she was ready to retire from the king whispering business. But old habits die hard, and she couldn't resist playing matchmaker for Jon and Dany. It turns out her final mission was about setting up the endgame against the Night King. No matter what you say about her rather gray, anti-heroic nature, she was definitely one of the most powerful women in all of Westeros, and she changed the course of several wars, led to the unintentional downfall of one king and the unquestionable success of another. Brienne of Tarth. Brienne of Tarth had been battling stereotypes and swordsmen with equal ferocity since time immemorial. Few mocked her for being tall, and few for being in love with a one-handed man with questionable character. But she never let any of that affect her. Without her, Jaime would not have pulled through, and things would have been very different in Westeros. From day one, society tried to shove her into the proper lady box, but Brienne was more about armor than ball gowns. Despite being a total boss on the battlefield, she was always ridiculed for not fitting the typical knight mold. You know, because apparently badassery is gendered in the Seven Kingdoms. When it came to squaring up with legends like Jaime, Loras Tyrell, or Sandor Clegane, Brienne did not just hold her ground, she owned it. Despite her tough exterior, Brienne's got this awkward charm about her, mainly because all she's ever wanted was a bit of respect, a lot of it actually, and a dash of acceptance. She's fiercely loyal to the few who've shown her kindness. Just ask the likes of Renly Baratheon, Catelyn Stark, and eventually Jaime Lannister. Oh wait, you can't. They're all very dead. But why I really like Brienne is the influence she has on the people she serves. Brienne has proven time and again that you don't have to be a lady or a queen to be powerful. Yes, she had the bronze, but they can only get you so far. I mean, the Mountain had a lot of muscles, but that was all he was. On the other hand, Lady Brienne, our Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, was someone who could change the way lords, ladies, kings, and queens thought and acted. And that was the power of Brienne of Tarth. Marjorie Tyrell. Queen Marjorie Tyrell was quite rightly the total package. She had brains, beauty, and political savvy, a feat only a few women achieve. As the gem of House Tyrell, she glided through the snake pit of King's Landing with the grace of a seasoned player. Schooled by the Queen of Schemes herself, Grandma Olenna, Marjorie knew how to play the Game of Thrones better than most. In fact, her marriages to Kings Renly, Joffrey, and Tommen were strategic moves aimed at increasing the power and influence of House Tyrell in Westeros, especially the last two. Marjorie had this uncanny ability to charm the socks off anyone, from the High Lords to the common folk. Contrary to what many believe, she genuinely cared about winning hearts with her charity work and had this knack for understanding what made people tick, especially the commoners. Even Joffrey, the poster boy for royal nightmares, softened under her influence. Now, he was someone who could only be controlled by Tywin Lannister, and if Marjorie could do something something about this boy king and make him dance on her directions, you gotta give it to her. She was in fact the only thorn in Cersei's Garden of Gold. While Cersei played the power game with fear and intimidation, Marjorie went about her business with finesse and charm. She swam the male-dominated waters of Westerosi politics with a smile and fooled nearly everyone, even the High Sparrow. I guess that's why Cersei had to walk the walk of shame and Marjorie was let go by the High Sparrow. Says something about the woman, doesn't it? In fact, Marjorie did die because of Cersei's cunning, but she was not outsmarted by Cersei. She smelled something fishy when Cersei didn't show up at her own trial. Marjorie knew the game was up and tried to get everyone out of the Great Sept of Baelor before Cersei's wildfire plan turned the place into history's most explosive barbecue. It was the High Sparrow, with his head too high in the clouds, who got played, not seeing the danger until it was too late. So, a woman too smart to understand the tricks of Westeros' first queen after Rhaenyra, you gotta show her the respect she deserved.
I did unspeakable things to protect my family.
Oena Tyrell. Lady Oena Tyrell, aka the Queen of Thorns, was the OG boss lady of House Tyrell, no cap. With her sharp tongue and even sharper mind, she was a force to be reckoned with in the cutthroat world of Westerosi politics. Rightly nicknamed the Queen of Thorns, her words could sting, which only made her one of the most beloved characters in the show. When Cersei blew up the Great Sept and took out the Tyrell lineage, Olenna knew that she had to avenge her fallen. Wanting revenge, she joins hands with Daenerys Targaryen. But as fate would have it, Jaime Lannister turned the tables and took Highgarden, leaving Olenna concerned. Yet even in her final moments, she dropped the mic by confessing to killing Joffrey at the Purple Wedding, ensuring Jaime knew who had the last laugh. Lady Olenna was no stranger to playing the long game. She had been around for a long time and saw several kings meet their ends. Naturally, with all that experience, she knew she needed to ally with enemies if it meant a win for her house. She had mad respect for power players like Tywin Lannister and knew that sometimes you've got to join forces with the less savory to stay ahead. And let's not gloss over the fact that she had the guts to poison Joffrey. Sure, killing a kid is dark, but in her eyes, it was necessary to protect Marjorie from a life of misery with a royal psycho. Olenna did what she had to do for her family. No regrets, no apologies. And let's be honest, she was one of the very few people who had the guts to argue with the likes of Tywin, and someone whose advice was sought by Daenerys, a queen in her own right.
Slip out of that gown and we'll see if I'm up to it.
Catelyn Stark. If there's one thing we know about Catelyn Stark, the Stark matriarch, it is that she was fierce about being loyal to her family and house. This lady was the heart of Winterfell, always stood by Ned, and raised a squad of kids who could give anyone in the Seven Kingdoms a run for their money. Sure, Jon Snow got the cold shoulder, but Cat still made sure he didn't drop dead on her watch. Now, I'm not saying that her treatment of Jon was righteous or motherly, but she had her reasons to do what she did. Now that we know Jon wasn't Ned's bastard, I wonder how she'd have treated Jon had she been in on Ned's secret. What I mean to say is, would she have supported the claims of a Targaryen to the Iron Throne? Or would she have stood with the young wolf if it ever came to that? The bravest of Catelyn's moments came during the Red Wedding, an event that's been etched in the history of TV forever. Catelyn went out like the boss she was, taking one of Walder Frey's countless wives hostage, only to meet a tragic end herself. That scene alone deserves a standing ovation for sheer badassery. But rewind a bit, and you'll see Cat lighting the fuse with the Lannisters way before that. She abducted Tyrion, and it was nothing short of a power move that set off a chain reaction nobody could put a lid on. And while she might have wrongly blamed Tyrion for Bran's so-called accident, her detective skills were rather on point. Cheers to Littlefinger, though, for his cunning and deception. Then there's the book version of Catelyn, who turns into a zombie-slaying machine named Lady Stoneheart, who is out for Lannister's blood. This version of Catelyn was brought back from the dead and could not speak. Catelyn Stark was the embodiment of family, duty, honor, even when it got complicated. She was the glue keeping the Stark kids tight-knit, and her loss hit them like a ton of bricks. Ygritte, the flame-haired wildling warrior, really knew how to shake things up for our boy Jon Snow. Straight from beyond the wall and always by Mance Rayder's side, she was no ordinary spearwife. However, their love story seemed more like the love story of couples like Romeo and Juliet. Jon, sworn brother of the Night's Watch, and Ygritte, a fierce free folk, started a romance that was all kinds of forbidden. She went from Jon's captive to his captor in a hot minute, and thus proved that taking the likes of Jon was not really a big deal for her. Oh, and the girl could fight. Whether she was letting arrows fly in open battle or sneaking around Castle Black, Ygritte was lethal with a bow. But let's not get it twisted. Her biggest soft spot was Jon Snow. Call it her Achilles heel, but it made her all the more relatable. And in the end, her only weakness, Jon, killed her. Her words, "You know nothing, Jon Snow," became legendary and was partly a tease and partly a bitter truth about Jon's cluelessness about life beyond the wall, love, and well, pretty much everything else. Ygritte's sass and spirit left a mark on fans and showed that she was not just tough in battle, but also fierce of heart. Osha. Osha was by far one of the most favorite wildlings of the entire show, and despite having a rather small role in the books, HBO's rendition gave her way more love and respect. From her grand entrance trying to take out Bran to becoming the Stark kids' fiercest protector, our wildling queen showed us that first impressions aren't always everything. She was street smart, savvy, and had a sharp tongue that could cut deeper than Valyrian steel. This lady played the long game and used people's underestimation of her to her advantage. Osha was always 10 steps ahead, except, well, when it came to Ramsay Bolton. That guy was on a whole different level of twisted, and unfortunately, our girl met her end at his hands. Her journey with Bran and Rickon was one of the best twists in the show. Apart from being their protector, she was their guide, their guardian, and at times, their teacher. And let's be real, her dynamic with the Stark boys brought some much-needed warmth to the icy north. But then, just when we thought Osha had more tricks up her sleeve, Ramsay happened. After all the battles, close calls, and clever maneuvers, to see her go out like that felt like a low blow. Osha deserved better, and so did we. Lyanna Mormont, one of the youngest northern ladies, was a pint-sized powerhouse ruling Bear Island like a boss. While kids her age in Westeros were playing lord and lady, Lyanna was out here schooling grown men on leadership. We all know Joffrey's tantrums, Tommen's hesitance, and Robin's, well, everything. But young Lyanna was in a league of her own, and mixed confidence with a solid head on her shoulders. The younger Stark children had too many people to train them and help them, and they became as strong as Lyanna much later, but she was born a lady. This girl knew when to listen up and when to tell her advisors to zip it. She's not just sitting pretty in her hall, she's making the tough calls. In fact, she was always smashing stereotypes left, right, and center as the top dog of a major northern house, all while keeping it 100% no nonsense. A lady with a boat full of pride, she was fiercely protective of her people and showed that she was all about action when push comes to shove. Sure, she played hard to get with Jon and Sansa, keeping them on their toes before jumping into the fray against the Boltons. But it took Sir Davos laying down some real talk about the big bad beyond the wall to get her on board. Yara Greyjoy. Yara Greyjoy, the saltwater queen of the Iron Islands and the badass Lady Reaper of Pike, was another force to be reckoned with. Daughter of Bayon Greyjoy and big sis to Theon, she was the last Greyjoy kid standing after a series of family tragedies. Raised in the rough and tumble world of Pike, Yara was not just any Ironborn. She was the captain of one of the best ships of the Greyjoy fleet, the Black Wind, and she had the battle scars to prove her mettle. When her dad met his maker, courtesy of Uncle Euron's ambition, Yara threw her hat in the ring for the Salt Throne. But when the Ironborn rallied behind Euron, Yara and Theon paced out with the fastest ships and their most loyal men. Aligning with Daenerys Targaryen seemed like a solid bet until Uncle Psycho came knocking, capturing Yara and throwing a wrench in her plan. But you can't keep a good woman down. Theon finally stepped up, rescuing Yara in a sibling tag team for the ages. Yara's comeback tour was also legendary as she took back back the Iron Islands like the boss she is. After Dany's downfall, she accepted Bran the Broken ruling the Seven Kingdoms. Let's get one thing straight. Yara doesn't play by the rules, especially not when they've been written by men who underestimate her. She's got a sharp wit that cuts deeper than Valyrian steel, and a no-apologies attitude that's all Ironborn. This woman has zero time for anyone's sexism, clapping back at Theon's jabs with the kind of sass that's become her trademark.
Some of my friends are more generous than others.
There's 1,000 girls like you in King's Landing.
Ros was a Westerosi escort, sure, but she was also a whole mood. Starting off at a brothel near Winterfell, she relied on her looks as much as she relied on her brains and ambition. She managed her way to King's Landing, but sadly, her story ended in a pretty horrifying way, courtesy of King Joffrey's sadism. Despite her profession, Ros was sharp as a tack and sweet-natured. She got tangled up in some Lannister drama, mistaken for Tyrion's main chick, Shae, and took a beating from Cersei's goons without spilling the beans. But Ros was a player in her own right. She sniffed out Littlefinger's shady plans and started playing the game, while keeping her cards close and her eyes wide open. Ros even joined hands with Varys and told him about Littlefinger's plans to whisk Sansa away. That takes guts, especially in a hellhole like King's Landing. But Littlefinger, the master manipulator, caught wind of her dealings with Varys and decided to make an example out of her. He delivered her to Joffrey, who, well, let's just say he didn't invite her over for tea. Littlefinger could have simply had someone kill her, but he wanted to send a message to Varys. Her tragic end served as a stark, pun intended, reminder of the risks involved in playing the Game of Thrones.
Our friendship.
There's a ship waiting in the harbor bound for Pentos.
Shae was a tough-as-nails kind of woman, but had a rather soft core, and all of this was wrapped up in layers of survival tactics. Coming from a background where being a prostitute wasn't a choice, but a harsh reality since she was just a kid, Shae developed a kind of armor. Her mom pushed her into this life at age 9, which would make anyone cynical and guarded about opening up. Despite all that, Shae had a heart, and a big one at that. Tyrion, of all people, saw through her facade and recognized a woman yearning for something more, something better than the hand she'd been dealt. And beneath that veneer of cynicism, there was a fiercely loyal and loving person, ready to stand up for those she cared about. Her relationship with Tyrion evolved from a mere transactional interaction to something real, something deep. They genuinely cared for each other, defying the norms and expectations of those around them. Shae also became somewhat of a protector to Sansa, and went beyond her role as a handmaiden to keep her safe. In fact, she also served Sansa as a friend in a world that was anything but friendly to the young Stark girl. But, like everyone in the world of Thrones, Shae had her flaws, jealousy being a major one. This jealousy, mixed with a cocktail of hurt and betrayal, led her down a path that ended in her being killed by the man who loved her the most. So that was all in this one. Soon we're going to explore a lot of things about the upcoming House of the Dragon Season 2. So if you've reached this point of the video, I suggest you stick around. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.